Hi everyone, I'm Gil Roth, president of the PBOA. We're a trade group that represents CMOs and CDMOs with FDA, Congress, industry, and people like you. Before we get started, let's see, there are 5 names up on the board up there. One of them isn't able to attend today, Kevin Orphan from Pfizer Center One. But I'd like each of our panelists to introduce themselves and say a little bit about their companies, and then we're going to launch into the conversation. So, Michael?
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Mike Riley, Vice President General Manager for Catalent Biologics. We provide a range of technologies and services for biologics developers, really from early stage through commercial. Happy to be here. Thanks.
Good afternoon. My name is John Foy. I'm with Patheon in our biologics unit. I'm the Vice President of Business Management. We have 4 sites providing early stage through commercial supply, process development and manufacturing with sites around the world.
Hi, I'm Mark Wright. I'm with Piramal Pharma Solutions. We're involved in the protein conjugation business, so our main interest is in antibody drug conjugates.
Hi, I'm Victor Vinci from Cook Pharmica. I'm Chief Scientific Officer. At Cook, we are a CDMO, and actually we've been calling ourselves a CDMPO for the packaging component as well. So we offer services from very early development all the way through fill-finish packaging.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Why don't we just launch into the basic opening question. What do you see as the biggest opportunities for CMOs in the biologic space right now? Michael, you guys want to tackle it left to right, and then we'll do right to left?
Yeah, so I think it's a great time actually for our industry. There's a lot of opportunities for companies like ours in the biologic space. You know, we're seeing tremendous growth in the pipeline for biologic therapies, and I think we're seeing a lot of new challenges for biologics developers, and that creates opportunities for a company like ours. I think just to name a couple, we're seeing an acceleration of clinical timelines, and very often a shifting of clinical timelines where CMC is very often now the critical path to approval. And that just increases the importance of partners, developing partnerships between CDMOs and innovator companies to try to speed their path to the clinic and to market. I think it also is kind of changing and evolving the way that we're working with some of our partners. And I use the word partner because it really needs to be a partnership between companies like ours and the innovators. We need to have that level of communication, that level of transparency in order to rapidly respond to changing requirements. I think one of the other trends that we're seeing is just an increase in complexity. So we're seeing new modalities, we're seeing different types of molecules, more complex molecules coming through the pipeline. Combine that with the speed and the need for fast development, and that really raises the premium for companies like ours that can apply technology, that can apply expertise in a variety of areas to help companies really speed their molecule to the clinic and to market. And so I think it's a great time for our industry. I think it provides a lot of growth opportunities for companies like ours, but it also offers us a real opportunity to actually really impact the way the biotech industry is evolving and move it faster to accelerate new therapies to patients.
So I agree with a lot of what
he said.
But I think the other part that we've seen as you see the customers really on these accelerated pathways is also looking at having the right business model for then the ability to supply commercial volumes. And with the technologies now where 2,000 liter scale single-use reactors are a known technology, and they can provide significant volumes for a lot of the therapeutics that we're working with. You need to look at different business models for the long term on how you can provide that long-term supply. And so within our Patheon network, we're able to look at how in the small molecule side of the world where there are condo structures and dedicated facilities being accommodated, we're now looking at those same kinds of opportunities so that we can provide a line of sight to secure supply at larger volumes than you typically would see in the clinical space, while still providing that speed to market that is definitely a demand now, and at this scale that is becoming more universally accepted for a wide variety of our our therapeutics.
I think I would agree with the point regarding the complexity of the products that we're seeing coming through. So as a conjugate provider, we are actually seeing a lot more products coming through and using that conjugation technology, but also we're seeing a whole new raft of technology coming through. So it's moving very much beyond the sort of oncology space into a wide range of new different payloads coming through. And that's also combined with a very tight timeline. So it is really becoming quite a challenging space now, because there aren't so many sort of standard projects coming through. Each one seems to be quite bespoke, and the timelines for that are very, very sharp now.
I'll echo Mike's comments. See accelerated timelines as an expectation, and as someone who spent most of his career in large pharma, you never wanted to be in CMC and on critical path, but often we are in critical path, so there's the tactical piece of actually managing that from a timeline standpoint, understanding the technical specs we're bringing in, and then hitting those marks as best we can. I think the biggest change, though, is trying to help manage risk, right? So it's easy to say, but are we all aligned if we're going to move fast and be flexible? Are we aligned as a client and a vendor on what that risk is, who owns that risk, and are we all comfortable with that discussion? I get pulled into a lot of these discussions from a tech service development and project management standpoint, and I told somebody the other day, we had a great discussion with a client. We should have had that discussion 3 to 4 months earlier than we did, because we were having it at the tail end of an issue instead of at the very beginning. And so it's very hard to manage that, because Cook's about 800 people, getting to be a bigger company, but we work with a lot of large pharma companies who sometimes have a wider range of different departments and groups involved, whether it's clinical and commercial. And sometimes we work with very small clients, which are 2 or 3 people in a virtual company who perhaps don't fully understand the risk that we're trying to describe. And so I think the ideal state for client and CDMO is, how do you have those conversations early, mitigate that risk? There's a contractual piece, but there's also a technical piece, and how do we make that happen in a fairly complex endeavor that we do, which is a biologic molecule, which has complexity, cell lines, which have their own interesting complexities, and on the back end, how do you do the fill finish in a way that is compliant and smart?
And are you seeing a shift in customer base at all in recent years? Are customers coming either from different geographies, different scales? You mentioned that obviously accelerated timeline is the big change in what they're demanding, but are you seeing business coming from different areas than you were used to? Hey, you could start with Vic and go back the other way, and whoever you want.
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know if it's a change per se as much as a growth. So we've grown to have more than 50 clients and over 120 some projects/products. So for us, it's more of growth among all those different venues, small companies, large companies. And fortunately and exciting for us, we've moved to doing more commercial production, which is a big change for Cook. That's exciting, but I don't know if it's necessarily a change in types of clients. It's just a growth which presents its own opportunity and challenge.
Gotcha.
We've seen a change from a lot of this was driven by technology holders based out of the US, but we're seeing a move now towards more European customers as well. So we're seeing a sort of wider adoption of the technology coming through. And along with that, we're seeing a change to see a lot smaller companies getting involved. And typically they're looking for more of a complete package from the CMO rather than just having discrete elements. So we certainly have seen a change in the last few years.
I guess I would say our distribution of customers is still pretty wide-ranging, from large pharma to small emerging companies. But I think the way that they interact with us is maturing quite a bit within how we set those interactions and the different types of work that you may work with a large pharma customer may be a little bit different than what it was in the past, based on the fact that they have now made major investments in the biologics production capacity. So I think the way we have those interactions now, it's a different cross-section of a work scope that we can get involved with them on.
Yeah, I think we're seeing growth across the board, really, I think in all customer segments. I think, large pharma, although they are building internal capacity, I think we are seeing a trend that there's increased prevalence of outsourcing even among large pharmas. So they're looking at strategic outsourcing in addition to doing things themselves, partly to move fast and also to access technologies they might not have in-house. That being said, there's a huge part of the pipeline that's being driven by small to medium-sized companies. And so we're continuing to see strong demand from that segment as well. I'd say a couple maybe of trends that we see, certainly with the growth of some of the markets in Asia. So China, the market's growing very fast. And there's a lot of companies in China that are focused both on the domestic market, but we're finding increasingly that those companies are looking towards global markets, and so are both looking within China and also outside of China. We're seeing growth in other Asian markets as well. A lot of Japanese companies are growing their biologics portfolios, Korean companies, the same thing. So I'd say a geographic trend, that's something we're seeing. To build on Mark's point on the conjugate space, which we also play in through our smart tag technology, I think historically, or maybe for the past number of years, a lot of that effort was focused more on the large pharmas, but as Mark alluded to, I think we're seeing more smaller companies looking at conjugates as kind of the next generation of therapy. And I think we're seeing a trend where people are looking for a given target, what's the best possible molecule that they can go after. And so and just not even in oncology, but in other indications, people are looking at conjugates in different types of molecules, where maybe historically they would always start with a naked antibody or a more simple protein. So again, I think that creates opportunities for companies with technology and with specialized services.
And can you speak a little more about the CMO response to big biopharma's increased investment in internal capacity? Was it something that you guys would see and, again, have to adjust what you're doing as a business, or was it in particular areas that you wouldn't have been playing in to begin with? And that can be to any of you who wants to chime in.
It's a challenging question because it is quite almost a divergent spectrum of things going on. So you still have some very large companies who are building out captive capacity, 12.5, 15K liter reactors. We're not going to, in my company, we're not going to compete with companies that want to be at that scale, and we're not going to build to that scale. On the other hand, the technology has enabled smaller scale production, 1K, 2K disposables, which much more in our capital wheelhouse, for want of a better way to describe it, allows for some of the flexibility we're trying to strive for anyway, and also for some of those companies which are either not that fully vested in very large reactors, makes the whole world a bit more portable, right? So they could, in theory, do work at our site in a 2K disposable bioreactor, transfer it to another site there, build out a site, and transfer those reactors. So it's interesting, there's kind of this dichotomy going on where a place where we won't play in the very, very large stainless steel reactors, but a place that there's still a lot of room to play for both small companies, mid-size farmers who haven't invested yet into stainless, and even a few large companies who are trying to rethink their strategy.
You guys, anything?
Yeah, I would echo something similar. I mean, I think the trend towards large pharma building internal capacity has been going and is going to continue, and that just speaks to the demand that's out there. I think right now 40% of the large pharma pipeline is biologics, 60% small molecule, and that ratio is probably going to flip over the next few years. So there's a massive amount of demand and of product coming through the pipeline, and in certain cases, particularly once a product reaches a certain scale, it will make sense to build. But